Why? And he used to go, and you remember, and he'd say the first person he knew, I'd forgotten that name, so, but I'm working hard at it, so thank you for your.
Oh, they're gonna bring her some oatmeal.
Do people of all ages get name tags, or?
Anyone who applies for one, they're free.
Okay, so, well, I hope any age person has a name tag. When I left St. James in Jackson, one of the parishioners said, "Ann, thank you for learning our children's names. It was a big church." So we all need name tags. Just a little bit of quick history. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and was very active at St. Barnabas Episcopal Church, 5th generation Episcopalian. So we've been involved in the Episcopal Church. Our family has for a long time. And I went to college in San Antonio at Trinity University. And after I graduated from Trinity, I stayed in San Antonio a year and then moved up to Dallas. And was in Dallas, I guess, about 6 years. And 3 girlfriends of mine and I, we took this Labor Day vacation. 4 days, 3 nights, airfare included, $199 to Cancun, Mexico. And we thought, this is a good deal. And so off we went. And we met a gentleman that night at our hotel when we got there who was in listening to this guy playing classical guitar. And that gentleman was Charles McLemore. And that is how I met my husband, was in Cancun. He's from Panama City, Florida. So we were gonna, after we got married, we were gonna stay in Cancun 5 years, and that turned out to be 22 years. So we finally thought we've got to get back to the States. But I attended seminary while living in Cancun. I commuted for 4 years, 1 weekend a month to Dallas, to the Anglican School of Theology. And it was a program that Bishop Stan and my bishop in Mexico had worked out. So we started a little Episcopal church in Cancun. If you're ever there, it's in English at the Marriott Hotel. And everything lives in the Del Boys room. There's this big box, and it's got 40 books of common prayer and 40 hymnals and these great looking t-shirts that have this funky palm tree and a cross, and it's St. Michael and Archangel's Episcopal Church, Cancun. And there's another funny story about those shirts. But so we eventually did move back to the States. We moved back to Florida, Pine Island, which is down around Sanibel in Fort Myers. And Charles died there of cancer. He found out he was sick and he died like the next month. So it was very quick, and my bishop said, let's get you to the other end of the diocese. So I ended up by St. Petersburg. And was up there, rector of a little church in the suburbs. And a friend of mine who was serving as a canon at the cathedral was called to be rector of St. James in Jackson, Mississippi. And he said, would you like to come be one of the associate rectors? It's a big church. I said, sure. So that's how somebody from Arizona, ended up at St. James in Jackson, Mississippi. And so I did that for 5 years, and then I moved back here in Texas. I have a cousin that lives in Lakewood. My 99-year-old aunt lives in Dallas. I just saw her this past week. So I do have a few connections in this area. I was interim rector for 21 months at St. John's here in Austin. And then I just finished about 16 months with St. George's in downtown. And it's a very different ministry. Interim ministry, you actually go and study for it and take classes. It's not a matter of just filling in empty space or empty time, but it's a time for a church to really kind of look at everything and what's going on and such. And then put another layer on that cake is the COVID and how we've all had to deal with that and how that has created and recreated so much in our church lives. You can walk in Jose Church now, there's this sound system all the back in churches that never had anything like that, but it's part of, who we are now. So what we're going to be kind of doing this next year is looking at the church, all of you all. And so I know it may seem like you were just going through this not that long ago. And it wasn't that long ago. But the world has so changed in those 3+ years now. So it's worthwhile to be able to look at it with fresh eyes and such, and think about what's best for 2022 and going forward. So the first part of those tasks that we'll be looking at is sort of the heritage of the church. And I know you probably think, oh, we know each other and we know this. But I'm going to set up some little times when small groups can get together and you all can share your stories, share the St. Luke stories. I'm reading the book, 51st Years, which is a great book. And I hope somebody is already charged with doing the next one. The reason it's worth finding someone now is I went to a church that had just celebrated their 50th anniversary the year before. And I said, why are the banners and everything, still up? That was last year, 50th anniversary. I said, let's start thinking about the 100th anniversary and such. And so as church ended and people are walking out, this little boy comes up to me and he goes, Pastor Ann, according to my calculations, only 3 of us here today will still be alive for that 100th anniversary. And I said, okay, you're now charged with that party. But we can't think like, well, we won't be around, we'll see what happens. Because history so makes what has brought St. Luke's to where you're at right now. And then what you do now, think about what people in 10, 15, 20 years will be thinking when they go, oh, what were they thinking when they did X, Y, or Z, or why did they do this or such? And it comes with a lot of responsibility that what we do now, decisions that are made, choices and paths, do impact the future of the church. And I think as we look at what church is being called to do, we're sort of being brought back out of our, COVID shell, back into church, getting everybody back into church. But now it's time to get back out again into the world and see what we're being called to do. So I'll stop talking here for a while and see if you all have any questions or such. Yes.
I don't have a question. I want to thank you for your biography.
Oh, you're welcome.
Really, for me.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yours is a wonderful story.
Well, thank you. That's how I learned to speak Spanish along the way too, so that was nice. Yes, ma'am.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what you've done in other churches as being a trained interim director? Like, what does that look like? And where's the big and what that may look like here at St. Luke's? And you may not know.
No, you do. One is to kind of, like we looked at St. George's whether or not to start the early service back up again. And that's still being debated. Their new rector starts September 1st. They got kind of left without anybody this summer. They're fine. They filled in. I think you're all called Trump to being longer without somebody. So the diocesan office is amazing how they put all this together and work all this out. But the interim work, it really, I think, pulls you to look at who you are now. And you all remember the Holy Cow survey? You're supposed to say yes. Well, we're going to probably do that again. And it takes a little sitting down and doing it, but it's not hard. And just do that from your heart and where you're at right now. Because the church where it was when you called your last rector, that church is long behind us now. Things have changed. As I mentioned in my sermon, who would think what happened at St. Stephen's in Birmingham last week at the church potluck would happen? And so, not that we should live a life that is fearful, but one that's faith-filled. And I think that brings it more to life. We've got to be faith-filled and not, live in fear. And frankly, that's what's slowly bringing us back after this pandemic. I found some old letters from 1918 that a cousin of my mom's had written. And he said, sorry, I haven't written for a while. We've all been sick around here. Well, 1918, 1919, there it was, the Spanish flu and such. So what are our letters going to look like when people come across them from this, time period? What do we want to be saying? It's exciting. So this interim work is going to be sort of in stages, but the initial one is to look at the heritage of the church. But there are three questions I want to keep putting before you all. And one is, who are we? And who are our neighbors? Now that can sometimes sort of change, but just think about that. Who are we? Who are our neighbors? And what is God calling us to do? So those are the three questions we'll kind of keep looking at. For instance, when I first got to St. George's, there were about 60 people in tents underneath I-35 across the street from them. And that really impacted life at St. George's in lots of ways, good and bad and such. But the reality was that was the situation. And you've got a school with 91 children under, kindergarten age that you've got to look out for their safety and well-being, and yet you are also trying to help people who need help. And how do we as church, fit that bill? And how do you become a bumper zone for fearful neighbors in houses here that they see the church as the only thing between them and I-35? So how does that church fill in? I was at St. John's, 40% of their people come to the 1 o'clock service, which is the Spanish service. And it is so different from the other 2 English services. And they do 4 bulletins every week, the early service in English, the later service in English, the Spanish service, and a Braille bulletin, because there are 4 blind members. So those are some of their special needs, is how to stay in communication with all these different members that have different needs and such. So that's why we'll be looking at the heritage of St. Luke's and what are the needs, how things changed, and kind of bring it up to where we are now. Yes, ma'am.
I think one of the things that goes through our mind anytime we have an interim or a new rector is how many changes are they going to make?
What are they going to do? What are they going to do to our church?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that you visited us before you said yes, or maybe not, but I was assuming that. Can you say right now if there are any changes you plan to make?
There's not going to be anything radical. A friend of mine who's in interim work, sort of when the COVID hit, he got to a church and they had shot glasses lined up all on the rail.
Please change that.
And so he said, I'm just letting you all know that we're not going to be doing this anymore. And so basically the interim time is not to be radical change time. It's to be kind of come back to zero. So that whoever the new rector is that you call, they can look at church at zero, and then they can help grow with you all as a church. But if the church for some reason is way off to one side on something, and you call a new rector, is this going to be the match? But no, I don't plan to change anything just for the sake of changing it, except for this morning. Because I just wanted you all to see the vacation Bible schools, and we talked about that. This would be neat because unfortunately, if you're at church sometimes just on Sundays, you may not be aware of all the neat things that are going on in the church during the week. So we thought we'd leave all this up. So get ready for the altar this morning. It's a little different.
Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. You all got a great bunch of leaders and teachers and kids that were all here. It was kind of wild and crazy. I mean, the office staff is putting up with me, and my office is like halfway unpacked. And so it's been an exciting week. But we're getting there. So thank you all, and thank you for the staff and for you all hanging in there with me on this. Any other thoughts?
Give us a couple of weeks.
It'll work both ways. Is your vestry behaving? How about anyone who's on the vestry that's in the room right now? Would you mind standing? Yeah. Unfortunately, our senior warden couldn't make it this morning, but what usually happens with these interims, the first connect with the interim priest is with the senior warden. So your senior warden has already, for the good or lucky him, has had hours and hours and hours with me. So we're sorry that he's not here, but look forward to having him back next week. Who's in the choir? That's what I was hoping I would hear. You're not playing hooky and say, oh yeah, we're just playing hooky. Who does all the recording and the techie stuff? Thank you.
This whole transition, I think that the staff here and the vestry have done an incredible job. Because during this transition, we've grown. I think one thing everybody realized, I realized, is we're the church.
Right, right.
You know, who's the church? We are.
Right.
We control the church and the vestry. I mean, the clergy basically works for us, right? So the staff runs this place, as far as I'm concerned, and the vestry, we're doing a great job.
You're so right. It reminds me of one summer, I was working at this tennis club out in Phoenix, and the owner, she was gone all summer. She left it to 4 or 5 of us college kids. And we grew the club better than any other year in the history of it. and she would call to check on us, and those were the days when somebody could call collect and you'd have to say whether or not you would accept the call. So she would call to check on us, and we're like, should we accept this or not? You know? So that's sort of how you all are, doing the same thing. Any other thoughts?
Tell your t-shirt story.
Oh, my t-shirt story. When some friends were visiting us in Cancun, we went out to lunch. There was a new Margaritaville by Jimmy Buffett. And so we were eating, it was like 3 in the afternoon, it wasn't very crowded at all. And I realized Jimmy Buffett was sitting at the next table. So I asked our waitress in Spanish, I said, is that him at the table? And she said, yes, he's making us nervous. We're dropping glasses when we're breaking things. He's making us so nervous. And so a little later on, he was up at the bar. And so I went up and introduced myself. And he says, well, what do you do here in Cancun? And I said, well, I'm an Episcopal priest. And he said, well, what's an Episcopal priest doing in a bar? And I said, Margaritaville's a restaurant too. And he said, well, Episcopalians sure have better music than Catholics. Keep in mind, he was in seminary at one point to become a priest, a Catholic priest, and decided to drop out. And so I said, are you going to be here for a few minutes? He said, yes. So I drove over to the Marriott, got into our box, pulled out one of our t-shirts, and went back and took him our St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church Cancun t-shirt. And he said, I'm going to wear this someday at a concert. And so I just thought, wouldn't that be neat to actually see him wear it someday? So, you know, you never know how your evangelism is going to play out with whom, you know. The average Episcopalian invites one person every 30, 40 years. It's not real great number. I think we can improve upon that. So, any other thoughts? How many left-handed people here? Wow. I'm left-handed, and the bishop that I was under in Mexico, he said, you know, don't ever be embarrassed about being left-handed. Do your blessings left-handed and such. And there's a really nice discovery series that this diocese put out several years ago. And it's got a woman in there who's doing the blessings with her left hand. And so this senior priest on this Pine Island sent me to the Neshoda House one summer for a couple of weeks. You know, I don't know if you know a lot about Neshoda House. It's very conservative, probably a more conservative seminary. And I waited a day before I told him that story, you know, what the bishop said about using your left hand to do blessings. And so the priest was teaching this liturgics class. There was just silence. And then he goes, wow, that's a different take on 2,000 years of tradition. So you never know. But that's why, if you'll notice it when we're back at the altar, the service book will be on the right. And because I'm doing the blessings with the left. In the church I was at in Mississippi, we had a 7:30 service, at 8:40, 11:05, and 5 o'clock. And we had 3 clergy and sometimes 4. And Altar Guild had to do a different kind of setup for each service. Because I was left-handed and I wanted here. One priest wanted on the altar, did not want to stand. And the other one wanted to stand. So they were having to keep track right before each service. The Altar Guild was who's up next, because it was a different priest each service. So like a friend of mine who was an archdeacon, she said she had a notebook on all the clergy in the diocese for their idiosyncrasies. And sometimes we come to think what we're doing is the way all Episcopalians are doing that the same day, and we're not. There was a clergy meeting in Southwest Florida once, and our bishop said, you know, I've been here 2 years now. I have visited every one of your congregations, and some of you are doing some pretty strange stuff. And so everybody's sitting there like, it's not my country. And we had an unusual prayer that I kind of inherited. The rector before had been there 17 years. And the bishop goes, Anne, get rid of that. Get rid of that prayer. That's one of the things that we don't need. We've got prayers in our book of common prayer for that. So, I look forward to living with you all, so to speak, as a church, what goes on during the week, what goes on, on Sundays. But do take time when you're at the altar rail to look at the post-it notes. You'll hear more about them, but just give yourself time to look at that. Anything else? Well, thank you all for being so patient and putting up with me, especially this first Sunday for all of us, and everything being a little different in church. You got a different priest and you got a whole different look, but thank you all.